the second day, and today we have a very great speaker today, Professor Ernst Niebur. I worked with him when I was at Hopkins, and we have several people who are here. Supratim Ray, S.P. Arun, they also worked with him closely when they were doing PhD at Hopkins. So it's great to see him here. So welcome, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great honor, in particular since this is the first workshop, and I hope it will be one of many. And I think it's a great idea. I think there is, of course, Telluride, to the right, and of course there's Capocaps in Europe. But I mean, there was a huge black hole here in Southern Asia, and I think this will be a great success. So thank you very much for inviting me. Also, thank you for inviting me in particular this day, because otherwise I would be under 2 feet of snow in Baltimore. There's a snow emergency right now, and Hopkins is closed, of course, so I so regret that I have to be in beautiful Bangalore. I forgot my clicker, so I have to do it manually. So yes, so I will be talking about selective attention, and I don't know what kind of style you prefer, but it's a workshop, so I would very much welcome questions during the talk. So if anybody has something to ask, please do interrupt me. So just a one-page overview. What I'll try to do. So first I want to motivate why attention is, well, maybe I'm biased, but what I think is one of the most important functionalities of our human perception, our human cognition. And I would go much further and say this is a much more general property that is shared pretty much among everything that has a central nervous system. I also think that this is something that is not limited to biological information processing, but I think it's also something that machines are using more and more. And I have one slide where I will refer to some concrete projects on that. So if it is so important, we should study it. And I'm a computational neuroscientist, so of course we want to study it quantitatively. So we have to have ways to codify this in terms of quantitative models, and then of course we need to have ways to test these models and predict and compare the predictions they make with experimental data. So I will talk about that, and then I talk about specifically one model and its ramifications that is feature-based, and I only mention that because I will not talk about some things that I had planned to do, which is object-based, which is a newer approach that we have been doing over the last years. And I put it here in grayed out letters because I promised it in the abstract, but there were some new things that came out over the last 10 days or so, or 2 weeks, that I wanted to include here, and so therefore I'm skipping all that part. So I only talk about the feature-based computational model, and I'd be very happy to talk to anybody who's interested in object-based approaches. And well, this is a neuromorphic workshop, so I also have a section on that where I talk about neuromorphic event-based approaches to computing saliency. Which is also quite new, came out a couple of months ago. So that's my plan for today. So what is selective attention? Functionally, it is the solution to a problem that is very old in evolution. As I said earlier, I think it's as old as the time when the first animal generated a centralized nervous system, something that is more complicated than the nerve nets of jellyfish or something like that. And the problem is information overload. So we have many sensors that we use and that we need because they might save our bacon at some point in life, and if it only works once in life, that's enough to justify the use of the existence of a sensor. So one example, and my apologies to those who have heard this talk before, I always use the same example. You have sensors on the back of your hand that you usually don't use very much, but if you bang into something, you definitely know that they are there because they warn you, and if you wouldn't have them, you might get hurt and infected and die. There's also another example that I like to use because it allows me to talk about the limitations of what I will be talking today. What I will be talking today is only what is called bottom-up attention, or what engineers and data science people would call data-driven, and that is the type of attention that is entirely driven by what the input to the system is. This is in contrast to something that is called top-down attention or goal-directed attention. That is something that your mind can control. And my standard example for that is that you also have lots of sensors in your feet. So, but hopefully, when you are now listening to me, you're not paying a lot of attention and looking and processing in a lot of detail the feeling of your right foot in your right shoe. But you can, because now that you think about it, you can direct your attention to it. So this is something that is a fascinating field, and we have done a little bit of work on it. But for reasons I'd again be happy to talk about, this is something I will not talk about today. I will only talk about data-driven attention. Okay? So how much is much? I said there's a lot of information that comes in, and information theory actually allows us to compute this, at least the order of magnitude, quite easily. So many people work in vision. I also have worked for most of my career in vision. So if we think about the visual system, how much information is coming in at any given time? Well, you may know that the human eye, as well as that of most primates, has about 1 million ganglion cells. And those ganglion cells are the only output from the eye. Everything else, there's lots of processing within the eye, very interesting stuff, but the output, everything that comes to the brain goes through a bottleneck of 1 million ganglion cells. They send it to the thalamus and then to other brain areas. How can we use it to compute the information that is coming in? Well, spike rates in neurons are on the order of tens of spikes typically. There's some that are fire like crazy. Many cells in the inner brain fire a lot less, only a few spikes per second, but 50 to 100 spikes or so is a typical number for a neuron that gets, for a ganglion cell, that gets inputs from a preferred stimulus. So we have, in a second, we have 100 yes-no decisions. Okay, spike or no spike. And so that means 100 bits per ganglion cell per second. So that means, given that we have a million of them, we have 100 megabits per second per eye. This is the input that's come to the brain from one eye. Okay, of course, that's not all of it. There's another eye. There's the auditory system. There's a tactile system. There's all the other things that we get from our body, our perception of our muscles, spindles, and all this kind of stuff. So the order of magnitude, so 100 megabits per second is 10 to the 8 bits per second. So let's say the overall is 10 to the 9 bits per second, a gigabyte per second. So that's the order of magnitude. Okay. This is a lot of information, and we know that this cannot all be processed at all times. So therefore, the nervous system needs to make decisions of what to select for processing or not, like the back of your hand and your right foot. That information is suppressed because you need to use your information processing capacity for the words and for the things on the screen. So this process of suppressing the information that we do not need is We call that selective attention. Okay? So, I was a bit sloppy when I said this is the information that is coming in, because this, of course, Shannon's information theory, on which this is all based, is all about the information capacity through a channel, but the emphasis is on the capacity. Is it really so what we computed is the capacity of the channel? Do we know that it is really being used? And the answer is clearly yes. And it kind of makes sense because it's very expensive resources on our brain. So it makes sense that evolution uses it, and there's tons of data that show when you do more specific calculations about that, essentially using the definition of information in a distribution, that the channel capacity is the order of magnitude it is used. So, and as I said, as in various systems, you can show that. So that's just to emphasizing the point that we have really that lots of information. So at this point, not infrequently when I talk about it, people say, excuse me, you encourage me to ask questions. You talk about the input, what about the output? And I used to hem and haw a little bit. There used to be there are some papers, pretty old, I think from the 70s maybe or 60s, where people tried to do this information theory for motor output, like skilled piano players, how much that is. But that was kind of obscure, and so I had to say, well, it's a lot less, we don't know, but it's probably like 95% or 99%, but I didn't have a clear answer. And so my question is, what do you think? How much is the output of the nervous system in bits per second? And if some of you have followed the science pages of various newspapers, please be quiet, because I don't want to get a biased view from the beginning. So what do you think? Is it is it more or less than the 10 to the 8 bits per second or 10 to the 9 that we get from the input? More? No, nobody. Less? Good. By how much? Factor of 10? Nobody. Factor of 100? 1,000? Factor of 1,000, so that would be one per 1,000 that would be used. Okay, only a couple of people, 10,000. Anybody between 10,000, 100,000? I mean, the sky is the limit here. Is it 1 bit per second? Well, it turns out, so a new paper came out, actually isn't out yet. It will come out later this month, at the end of the month, in Neuron, by Markus Meister, some of whom may have heard his name. And there's no new data in it, but they did a very, very careful analysis of old data. And their answer is, they looked at the output, exactly what I mentioned of the motor system, because we can quantify that pretty easily, and that is 10 bits per second is the total output of the human motor system. And they did that. They looked at typists, not piano players. They didn't cite the old papers that I knew, but they looked at typists. How many bits per second does a skilled typist produce? It's 10 bits per second. Okay. Now, well, you say, well, our muscles are kind of slow. I mean, I can think a lot faster than I can type and all that. So it's still a long way to 10 to the 9, but. That's a concern. So they looked at other data where they used something that is specifically designed to be a communications channel. Okay, and that is a natural language, so spoken language. And again, and in this case, what they used is the training for professional speakers. How many words per second should you produce to be understandable? Okay, when I'm speaking now, I'm not a professional speaker, but something the order of magnitude is probably not that different from it. Well, it turns out it's the order of magnitude is again 10 bits per second. When I say 10, it's always it's never more than 20. I think it's never much less than 10, but it's the order of magnitude is 10. Okay, so maybe the problem is even in speaking we use our muscles, so let's think about something that happens entirely in the brain, okay? And what the example that they found is, sounds a bit bizarre, but it's blind cubing. What does it mean? Well, you all know Rubik's Cube, the thing there, and there are competitions and very skilled people that get amazingly good at that. And to make it more interesting, they invented a version of this in which they do it blind. Of course, you need to know what the original structure is. And so what they do is they give you a cube, and then you have as much time as you want to look at it, and then they blindfold you, and you have to to rearrange it. And at that time you have as much time as you want, but you're also timed on that one. Okay, so this is a great case where we have decoupled entirely the perception, which only occurs during the time when they look at it, and the motor output. Okay, so it turns out the world champion needs 12.8 seconds for the whole thing, and half of that is for the perception part. And again, if you go through all 10 to the whatever number of combinations that the cube can have, it turns out this is 10 per second, 10 bits per second. It's also kind of interesting that this idea that the motor system is slow doesn't seem to be true, at least for this task, because they do seem to split their time, which is entirely at their distribution. The total time they split about in half. So half is looking at it, and half is very quickly arranging it. Okay, so it does not look like the motor system is particularly slow. It does certainly seem that there is at least one of the bottlenecks, in addition to muscle movement, is in the brain. 10 bits per second. I think the last example, there's more of them. I skip this. Speed cuts, I skip this. You know the drill. But the last one is, because this is less obscure and everybody probably has played this, is thinking imaging. Thinking, pure thought. So this is a game of 20 questions, and you know, if you do a somewhat speeded version, the way to do it is, okay, I give you, think quickly about something, an object, a person, whatever you want, but do it quickly, within a second or two, and then you have 20 questions, and I guess it then. Well, 20 questions, yes, no, it's 20 bits, okay? And again, it's 10 bits per second. The outcome, because that's what the time that you have is let's say a second, and or 2 seconds, so 20 bits per second. Okay, none of this is new. All of this is in the literature, but nobody ever puts this all together. And this is there's more examples, and I can put the paper on the Slack. I mean, it's out in preprint and all that. So we have, looks like what they point out is we have two brains. One is the outer brain, our periphery, where we have a gigabyte per second coming in and being processed very efficiently, because that's everything we do is determined by that. And then we have the inner brain that produces the output, whether it's motor output, whether it's speech, whether it's thinking, which is 10 to the 8 times slower. And they call it the shifting ratio, I would have called the filtering or something like that ratio. But as they point out, and I think it's true, this is maybe the largest unexplained number in brain science. I think this is really fascinating. Why that is, we don't know, and they read the paper. It's very nice to read. What the resources really are, we don't know, but a single neuron has typically a higher throughput than the whole organism. This is some things to think about. Okay, so one thing that actually they point out is the very model that I will be talking about in the next. Maybe one of the ways, and I'm sure there are others, is one of the ways to do this filtering, to go from the Hoover Dam of information to as much as we can to as much as we can actually process in the inner parts of our brain. So this is my hopefully very strong motivation why selective attention is extremely important for everything we do. Yeah, what are these resources? So this is all the last two slides are entirely summarized from their papers. This is not my thoughts. I copy just what they say. What are these resources? We don't know. At least I don't know. Maybe somebody here knows. Okay, but there's nothing like first-hand experience. So let's try my other way to convince you of the importance of selective attention. And that is, let's see how it works in you. So we do a little task, a little psychophysical experiment, and there's three parts of it, and in all three parts, you have to tell me whether on the screen, right there, there is a target, which is always a red vertical bar. So if there's a red vertical bar, there's a target. If not, there is no target. Okay? And it's obviously it's not going to be there or not there. That would be by itself. That would be a bit trivial. But there's distractors around it. In the first part, the distractors are green bars. Okay? So I click this thing as fast as possible. That gives probably like a fraction of a second. And you can look at it and tell me if you see a target. Okay? Ready, set, go. Target? Everybody. Good. Okay, that was not too hard, right? Okay, now we do the same thing. Again, in all three cases, the target is the same red vertical bar, but now we instead of the color, it's going to be the orientation that is different for the distractors. And I don't know if it's more difficult, you'll see. So again, ready, set, go. Everybody, okay, very good. So by now, you guys are good. You are trained observers, okay? So the next should be very simple because it's simply a combination of the two. Okay, we have the first one and the second one, we combine them. And again, one target, yes or no. Oh, I didn't give you the, oops, well, okay, I gave it away. Here it is. Didn't give you the ready, set, go. But I think probably even without that, that was not a trick that I put in. I mean, I think you will agree that this is quite a bit more difficult. Okay, even though there's no trick at all. This is, and of course, it's not my invention. That is something. It's called a Treisman task by Ernst Niebur, who passed away, I think, last year ago. From 1980, and she did this many times with systematically. I'll show you on the next slide the quantitative results. But if you just look at these three examples, these are the exact examples that I used. You can see there's a clear difference in difficulty, and if we quantify what distinguishes the easy cases from the hard cases, it's what Ernst Niebur called the easy ones are a single search, which means there's a single feature that distinguishes a target from the distractors. In one case it's orientation, in the other case it's a color, and the other one is a conjunction search. So you have to conjoin two different properties. If you look at only one of them, you have half the distractors on average that you can't filter out, but so you have to use both of them, and you might think this only might take twice as long, but it's not true. If you do it systematically, which of course she did, you find that it's not only harder, but it's harder in a very interesting way. So what this shows is the reaction time as a function of the display size, which display size is nothing but the number of distractors. Okay, and what you see is, so you have this experiment has been done probably 1,000 times in various labs all over the world, and this is the first one, so it's the most simple one. So she goes up to 30 distractors total, which is about what I had on my slide. But you see that if you do the feature task, if the target is present, it doesn't matter how many you put. It actually does. It goes slightly up, and people have written many papers on this slightly going up too. I'm not going to talk about that. It's true. It's no doubt it's true, but it's a detail we are not concerned with here. But it's parallel processing. It doesn't matter how many distractors you put, you get the same reaction time. On the other hand, if the target is absent, you get linear increase. And again, there's only 4 points here, 1, 2, 3, 4. But again, this has been repeated. It's clearly a linear increase. Okay? Now that's great. So we see not just a quantitative difference. It doesn't get just twice as hard or something like that as here. It doesn't jump from here to here. But instead, it's a qualitative difference. It goes up in a completely different shape. Instead of staying essentially constant, it goes up essentially linearly. Okay? So that's one great thing about it. The other great thing is, well, we have a slope. And the slope is 60 milliseconds per item. Okay, so we can quantify something in the brain with this simple experiment. So, well, the interpretation that Ernst had, and I think it's essentially true, and again, I neglect all the details and intricacies and fine points, but essentially what she says, and what I agree with, is that this is a self-terminating search task. So what happens is you're searching for the target, and you terminate it when you have found it. Okay, and in the case of the feature task, you have the only way you cannot do it in parallel. In the case of the attention task, you can do it. So your search terminates by looking at it. You see the target, done. In the case of the feature of the conjunction task, you cannot do that. To solve the task, to identify a target as being there or not, you have to do something that you can only do sequentially. So therefore, if you have twice as many things to go through, it takes you twice as long. If you have 10 times as many to go through, it takes you 10 times as long, so you have a linear dependence. And the time it takes for each step, well, we get from the slope. So if the target is absent, how can we be sure of that? Well, the only way to be sure of it is to go through every single one of them. Okay? So if on the other hand, if the target is present, well, then on average we find it after half the time. Okay, and that is why this slope here is only 30 milliseconds per item. Okay, so that gives us the speed of our mental process, which I think is a pretty cool thing from a very simple experiment. Okay, yeah.
I have some guys working at Western Sydney who've been doing these EEG experiments, and it's face or detection of object recognition, but using EEG.
Yes. And
it seems that you can flash faces much more quickly than you can actually recognize them themselves, but still catch the signal in the EEG if the target is there.
Yes, yes.
Has this sort of task been done with EEG as well, and do you get a very different...
I don't know it, but I know that I would expect it because it has been done so many times. But yes, okay, there are many others. I mean, that's like, for example, Simon Thorpe, even more complicated ones. I mean, what he found is when you can if you flash images every 100 milliseconds, for example, and you ask, I think the more complicated question, is there anything living in there? Can be a spider, can be a monkey, can be anything. Even that you can do in 100 milliseconds. So there's certainly some, in the feed-forward part, there's certainly a lot of parallel processing going on, which is probably part of this outer brain part that we talked about. Now, about this specific, I can't say that, yeah.
The thing is, your brain can do it in 100 milliseconds, but you can't give the answer by pressing a button.
Yeah.
It's all passive, basically, in the EEG signal.
Yes, so the
subject is often not even aware that they've got the answer.
Yeah. That's what I mean by the outer brain. That is before we have conscious perception and a possibility to react to that. That's outside the 10 bits per second range, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Okay, this essentially, I just said that. All of it on this slide I told you already. So, everybody convinced that attention is something worthwhile studying and it's worth to get a quantitative handle on it, if for no other reason because we want our machines to benefit from it, because our machines have the same constraints, because they also have typically more sensory input than you need at any given time. And of course, they are probably more designed, many of them are more designed for a more limited range of environments, so the sensors are more targeted for them. But as soon as you go out in the wild, your robots might, for example, encounter situations that require more processing, and processing is expensive. So that's one reason why you may want to study it. But of course, the other reason, and personally I'm actually more interested in it, is understanding what's going on in my own brain and your own brains. So if we agree on that, then let's see what can we do quantitatively. How can we model this process, this selection process? So the roots of this go back quite a while. So I did my postdoctoral work with Christoph Koch at Caltech in the 80s. No, that's right. I started in '89, in the first half of the 90s, and half a decade before that, he was a postdoc himself, working with another postdoc, Simon Ullmann, a pretty well-known computer scientist, and they were both postdocs in Pozzio's lab at MIT, and they came up with a concept called saliency maps. They were thinking about this very problem. How can we understand bottom-up attention, the easy part of attention that I said I will talk about? And what they said is, well, we want to attend to something that is important and that is, and that we call that something that is salient, that stands out in the visual scene. Now, what is salient? What stands out? Well, if something is all black, that's not something. Nothing here stands out, because it's just all black. You have basically one bit of information. It's a few bits. It's the color of this whole area, but it's the same for every location in this. What stands out is something that is different from its environment, like the red target on a green background. Okay, and that applies to everything. It can be the vertical target on a horizontal background. It can be intensity. It can be everything. Okay, there's many features that we have represented. We have this center surround difference that makes something stand out. And so what they said is, well, what we have to do is we have to look to combine various features, and this dot means there's many more of them, then we combine them somehow. And if we do that, we integrate them all, and we call this a saliency map, because it's a map of the local salience in a complicated scene. And then our job is nearly done, because the most salient thing is, by definition, the highest point, the highest valued point in this two-dimensional scalar map. And this is what we call, which is where we should first attend. And then we attend to the second to the second salient, the third salient, and so on. Okay? So this is a practical way to solve this problem. Okay, if you want, it's a smart way of doing redundancy reduction. There's a lot of redundancy in this thing here, but if there's one bright spot in here, that is the one point that we want to direct our attention to. Okay, and it's kind of a detail. There's a very elegant way to implement the scanning through the scene, going from the highest salient to the next one, it's through something that has been discussed, that has been discovered by psychologists, I don't know when, probably 50 years ago. It's called inhibition of return. If you attend to something, then you are inhibited to attend to it immediately after that for about a half a second, so 500 to 1,000 milliseconds. Okay? So, yeah.
I don't want to be the only one asking questions, but
somebody should. Somebody should.
We need more questions.
Yeah,
I think.
I agree.
More active audience. But In terms of active perception,
Yes.
is this identical to saying pay attention to that which would add most of new information to what you know about your environment?
I mean, active perception, this is the other part. This is the goal-directed. I give you a task. And we have done exactly that experiment, I saw the data later, where we tell people, tell me what is the most, well, we call it interesting, but we show that it is very closely related to the saliency based on the saliency model. So it can be the most salient that you are the most salient part of the visual scene if you're instructed to do so. But you can also definitely override it. You can, within limits, something that is very strong stimulus. If I'm eating and a bee stings me, that attracts my attention directly. But I mean, exactly, yeah. There's things that are very deeply hardwired, that like pain, that are or looming of dangerous objects. It's hard to override, but many others we can override. So it's definitely possible, but it's not obligatory. Okay, other questions? Yeah.
You're talking mostly about the visual part,
yes.
But I'm guessing for the other senses also the attentional modality and the saliency feature is pretty much a similar architecture?
That is exactly the idea. And people have made models. The first model that I'm aware of the auditory selective attention, actually what they did is they took our model that I show in the very next slide, and they applied it to a spectrogram by Kaiser et al. And I don't know when this was in the early 2000s or something. But the people have become more. It works to some extent. But the basic idea is definitely the same. I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, if you're sitting on a chair and something pokes. I mean, that attracts your attention, not the broad, flat face that you're sitting on. And
so is there also some work related to tactile?
Yes. Yeah. Not much. I mean, touch is. We have worked a little bit on that, but on tactile attention. But on the other side, on how you use this, the attended part, not how you select what is going to be attended. It's very much understudied. I mean, anybody wants to go into the field. Unfortunately, the people that I worked with, that I got my data from, they are no longer there. So that is something I think it would be a nice career to do, selective attention in tactile perception. Absolutely understudied, yeah.
Thanks.
And very important. Okay, so I said that they came up with this basic idea, but it was a concept. So they just said, well, we should do this, and they had very, very good ideas. But when I heard about this, I thought we can do better. We can make this a quantitative model, and this is the model. So essentially, I took this idea and wrote a C program, and together that first came out in 1936, and then Laurent Ity, who was by now very well distinguished professor at USC, he was a first-year graduate student at the time, and that was when I left Caltech to go to Hopkins. So he took over that, and he's a trained computer scientist, so his code was so much more beautiful than mine. So, but this is a model that we built and implemented, and that is still very much in use. So, well, think about what we start from. This is a visual scene. Here's one. And we have the feature maps. Remember the color, orientation, and all that. So we have a set of feature maps, and they occur at different. The features occur at different sizes. You can have a small balloon, and you can have a large balloon, and even the small one becomes larger if you approach it more. So you need to do it at many different spatial scales. Okay, so we have different maps, color, intensity, orientation. And we have it at different scales, represented by these different rectangles. And then the next step is I said we want to look at differences, local differences. Well, that we can do that. You take a difference of Gaussian or something like that, apply to it, any model you prefer. So that gives you center surround maps, which are one-to-one related to these here. Okay. And we do a bit of normalization. Tell you about if you're interested in that. But essentially, that it's there to emphasize the differences, so that the signal-to-noise ratio is better than if you only look at the raw maps, and they have different scales, the different maps. I mean, how do you compare red versus green with different orientations and all that? So we do normalization. And after that is a tricky part. Now we have all the raw elements, but now we have to combine all of these very different things, color and orientation and intensity and motion, and we have to combine them all in one single map. And how do we do that? That seems like a mathematically very poorly defined operation. How do you add red minus green with different vertical minus horizontal orientation? But we know the brain can do it, so we should be able to do it. The brain does it very simply. It just adds up the spikes that are coming up from here, and spikes are universal currency in the brain. So we just add them up, and to our surprise, it worked a lot better than we thought. So that gives us a saliency map, and the saliency map for this scene here is shown here. It's a static scene, so the motion channel contributes nothing, but this is the saliency map. But you can see some of the elements. So for example here, the surf line is prominently represented because you have orientation difference, you have color difference, you have intensity difference. All three feature nets contribute here, they added up, and so therefore this is high. The clouds are also there because you have color differences, intensity differences, and this is how you get the saliency map. Okay? So I should probably ramp up a bit. But this is important. So is there any questions to this?
So it looks like scalable, right? You can add more and more features like texture and maybe motions and so on.
Absolutely.
How do you give weightage to individual features?
How do we weigh them?
How do you weigh them, right?
Yes. Very good question. So the first, we had no idea. So first we said, we threw up our hands and we just weighted them all equally. And it works. It works surprisingly well. But there's clearly differences. And later, actually, so the person who actually made, whose vacation picture this is, was one of my grad students, Derek Parkhurst, and he was the first, I believe, who actually introduced motion in it. I mean, we never published it in this paper, but it seems intuitively clear that motion is more important than orientation difference or something like that. And so other people have done more careful studies, for example, Laurent. And so it turns out it's about an order of magnitude, factor of 5 or so more important, averaged over.
We have top-down approach as well here to weigh them.
Absolutely, and that is something that we did actually at the time with Laurent. So top-down, if you're looking for a Coke can, standard Coke, no diet or something like that. Well, I tell you, find me a Coke can. Well, you look for something, not for something green, right? You look for something red and of this size and all that. So we definitely we can fine-tune these weights. But in general, the default of taking equal weights does work if you fine-tune it. And we used a factor of 5 in the model that I'll talk about later. We used a factor of 5 for the motion channel, higher than intensity channel. It does work better. Okay? Yeah.
What are these different layers that you have, like within each, for example, in the synthesis?
Here?
What are those different size of rectangles? Are they just different scales that you have?
You mean here?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are the different scales, the spatial scales. So you can think of we do it in octaves, so you can think of this is the image, this is reduced by a factor of 2, the next one is reduced by another factor of 2, and so on. Yeah, sorry for not being clear. Okay, all right? Any other questions? Okay, great. So, okay, now I talked about scanning the scene, having the trajectory, generating it going from the most salient to the next, to the next, to the next, and we talked about the timescale, how that works, and that is all done by the inhibition of return mechanisms that I mentioned. And if we do this on the scenes, very much like you have done before, I mean, this is our target thing again, and this is a feature task, this is a feature task, this is a conjunction task. Well, if you compute the reaction time, in this case, of course, we don't use time, we use a number of misses, then you get again parallel here, feature task, parallel here, feature task, roughly linear in the conjunction task. So that's a treatment task done by the computer. And this is all looks very dirty and all that because we added noise. It's not sloppiness, but it's we added noise in the orientations and just short noise in the background to make it a bit less trivial. Okay. We can do this on real world examples. Traffic scenes, for example, works. But the question is, how do you test? So this is our model, and this is the output of the model. Now we come to the next part, how we compare its predictions with the real thing, with human behavior. And so what we did, and this is again my former student Eric Parkhurst who did that, we take a bunch of natural scenes, we have people view them, and then we observe the eye movements, and, I thought I had, here, yeah, it's here. And we observe the eye movement, and the eye movements are it's called overt attention. The part that I talked so far about is covert attention because you can do it without eye movements, but typically you don't do that. Typically, if you're attempting to something, you make a saccade right away to something like that. And so we used, because it's so much easier, you can measure covert attention obviously, but it's so much easier, you buy an eye tracker and you're in business. So therefore we measure the performance of a model by looking at the location of humans' fixations, and so we use scenes, and when we get we compare the saliency at the locations that are predicted by the saliency map, which are here, with what you expect from chance, which is here, and you see we are many orders of magnitude, we are many standard deviations away from it. Yes, question? Louder. I think I need the microphone.
Hi, can you hear me now? Yeah. So you said that the brain computes the saliency map by adding up the spikes.
By what?
Adding up the spikes.
Yes, correct.
So that means different areas of, for example, the visual cortex will have different saliency maps because they would prefer different.
Okay, that's a very good question. That's the question, where is the saliency map? And there's many answers to that. Some say actually V1, some say superior colliculus, some say parietal cortex. And there's good evidence for all of them. It's quite possible that there's more than one. And that they interact, but we don't really know.
So when you're talking about that, the eye movements, they are actually reflecting the saliency map.
Yes.
So that means that, for example, if the map is of superior colliculus,
yes,
then that will be related, like that will be shown in the eye movements. So this eye movements are dictated by superior colliculus.
Yes. When the eye movements are mainly the frontal eye fields that are influenced by the frontal superior colliculus, as you say, but it's probably a bit more complicated. Nobody has found the one and only saliency map. Okay? Okay. Let's skip about that. We can do it with other ways, interesting ways. It's not limited to free viewing, so there are other paradigms we used. We can do it in much more complicated scenes. Actually, the saliency outperforms humans. Object-based, but what about neuromorphic? I know that I'm getting towards the end of my allotted time. So what about neuromorphic engineering? This is why we're all here. So I wanted to devote the last part of my talk specifically to neuromorphic engineering. So there's work. Where's Kara? So there's actually Kara and I. We have been working a bit on that. And actually, the very next talk will be by Chiara. And I don't know if you're going to talk about this. Will you? Okay, perfect. Because I have nothing more about this. I just thought I mentioned it here. So it is something of real-world importance, and you can build a saliency map from events, from spikes, and hopefully you will hear a bit more about that. What I do want to talk about is some new work that we published just a couple months ago that was with Camille, Simon Chain, and Xiao Leng, and Riyad Benazman, and Riyad. And so for those people that have been coming to Telluride, they know Xiao and Riyad, because this is actually how I got to know them. So that's why these workshops are so great. So what we wanted to do is, and it was Camille's PhD thesis, so that's how Camille comes in there. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to create what I call a native neuromorphic saliency map based on just the raw neuromorphic event-based hardware that we have. So, well, I'll show you the data that we used to produce it in the next couple of slides. But here's the algorithm how we computed the saliency map. So what is shown here is a 3D, it's a 2D image, x, y, and what is shown here is it is shown as a function of time, and every dot here corresponds to one event from a DVS, from a digital vision sensor, which is of course a type of camera that produces the events that we use. So every dot is one of them, and so what we do is for a given event, which is at this at the center of this smallest rectangle here, this is an event that is characterized by its x, y, and t coordinates. For each of them, we want to know how much it contributes to saliency, and we do this by seeing how much its local environment, both in space and time, how active it has been in the immediate past, which is, of course, this is time t, so the immediate past is shown here, different scales. This is for 10 milliseconds, the smallest here, cube here is 10 milliseconds long, this one is 20 milliseconds long, it seems a bit distorted, not proportional, and the longest one, it's also the longest one that we looked at, is 320 milliseconds long, and the same in space. And we are showing only 3 scales here. We actually used 6. That turned out that we got a good compromise both in space and time. So essentially what it gives is, we call it the saliency score for every that shows the activity in terms of events that have been generated in its spatial temporal environment. Okay? And then we take the sum of all of them. We do this for every event, and then we take the whole. We add up all these saliency scores and call this provisionally our event-based spatial temporal saliency map. And again, as before, well, it's just a hypothesis, so it makes any sense. Whether it does or not, we have to do formal comparisons with human behavior, and that is what I'm going to show you in the following. Okay, does it make sense? So why do we that? I come back to that a bit later. Why do we that? Because it costs essentially nothing. We're adding up a couple numbers, no convolutions or normal. There's some normalization. We divide, so we have everything within a range of 0 to 1 or something like that. But no other computations. It's just very close to the raw output from the DVS. Okay, so yeah, we have to compare the predictions with human behavior. So we do the same thing as we did before. We compare with human eye movements. And by the way, this thing that I believe Derek Parkhurst, my student, invented, I mean, that's the standard thing everywhere when you have in deep learning or everywhere. When you look at the output of attention models, they all use this method. They all look at overt eye movements. So Camille went out in the streets of Paris and took video clips, and she used the ATIS DVS, and that was very convenient because it produces events, and at the same time, from the events, it gives you a frame-based grayscale image. Okay, so that was recorded, and we have like about 600 of them, and then we again, Mini Camille, at her lab, I mean at the lab, at Riyadh's lab at the time, at the Sorbonne, they brought in human subjects, and they did free viewing, the same task that we used 20 something years ago, and so the task was just to look at them. We told them, well, enjoy the show. There's 300 each of them, so 300 pics, 300 videos, and they moved their eyes, and that's what was recorded. And this is one example. That's the Place de la Bastille, right next to their institute. So it's a street scene. This is something artificial, that they just a rotating thing there. This is from the database they called People, just people walking in the street. This is football, very popular in Telluride. So they did the football thing, and each of them has the total was 600, as I said. And then we have the so these are the 6 classes, and the numbers are the number of video clips, and the green ones are the saccades, and the red dots are or circles are the saccades, and then we compare it with 2 relatively standard saliency maps that all go back to our old saliency map model that I explained earlier, that you have seen. So this is a fancy one, proto-object based, that I can't talk about today, but that is state of the art. This is the old one, the one that I explained. However, we added motion because it seemed unfair to this model if we have moving videos and there's no motion in it. So we added the motion component that we took, I think, actually from Jamal's model. And then we look at 4 different metrics, and I don't have time, but there's the standard methods that you use. There's not all of them. There's maybe twice of them if you take all of them that people have looked at. But these are 2 location-based, 2 distribution-based. So we try to be fair and not be selective. So these are all that we used, about half of all available. And then we looked at the performance. And so what is shown here is, I won't go into detail, but this is for, the first one is normalized scan passing. So this is for the 6 types of scenes: football, Bastille, objects, and so on. Each one is one panel. And what we plot here is the performance in the according to this metric for the 3 different models. Blue is is our new fancy model that I told you about. The black one is the old ET&R. The colors are not great here. The black one is the old ET&R, which I explained earlier, with the motion channel added, and the red one is the newer proto-object based. And with Wave, we thought a lot how to present it. So what we ended up doing is we plot them in the order of performance on our new model. So that's why this is monotonically increasing, the blue one always. And the others, well, obviously for the same video corresponds to the same vertical height here. But for that reason only, they look jagged, and the blue one looks huh?
What's the vertical axis?
It's a performance according to the NSS. It's a normalized scan pass. And it will be exactly the same in the following few. Like one of them is the AOC curve, and there it will be AOC on the vertical axis, and so on. Yeah. Is the presentation clear? Is the representation clear?
You can stop.
Yeah, I know. I'll stop very soon. Yeah. But that's the only reason why this is smooth always and the others are always jagged. What is important is that, as you see, I mean, the blue one is not by no means always better than the others, but typically it is. Okay? So this very simple model that costs us nothing except for a bunch of additions performs as well or better than one classical and one state-of-the-art saliency map model. So this is the same thing, AOC, area under the curve, shuffled. And again, it's not always better, but typically it is. This one, I think the sim, it's a very old measure from the 80s. I think Dana Ballard came up with the similarity between two pictures. And this is the worst performing for our new model. And again, this is Pearson cross correlation, correlation coefficient. Sorry. And again, it's not always better, but it at least holds its own with the other. So this is all you don't want to look at this, but it shows again what I just said. The bold ones are in circles are the best ones, and you see that our model is typically not always, but typically at least as good as the others. Okay, so this is my. I don't have to go through every word because I'm out of time, but essentially what I emphasize is that we can get, in a very neuromorphic way, we can get at least a crude estimate of a saliency map directly from the events with minimal computation. It's not perfect, but it's so cheap. I think it's definitely worth doing, in particular if you have limited computational resources on a mobile platform or something like that. This is extensible. For example, this is all grayscale because this is what the standard ATIS does. It's an ATIS that has colors, so it could be repeated to have more modalities that are integrated. I'm actually working with somebody on eager motion, how to deal with that, because this was a stationary camera that had only moving objects in there. And we definitely, so Camille did her PhD on it, but there was a lot of data collecting and the human substance and all that. So she definitely did not spend a ton of time in fine-tuning it. So I'm sure that the different parameters can be tuned. There's not many of them that can be tuned much more to make it much more efficient. And of course, one question is something like that straightforward reading out of spikes? Is it something that could contribute to saliency? That's another open question. That's, I think, oops, no, wait. This is, I don't think I have to do that. I hope I convinced you that attention is important, and I hope that some of what I said stays in your memory. And the slides, if you would like, I'd be happy to put them on the Slack. Thank you.